the post-war stabilization body for Gaza. The announcement surprised diplomats because it went well beyond what the UN Security Council had authorized under Resolution 2803, adopted in November 2025. The resolution had approved a temporary board of peace to oversee Gaza's post-conflict transition with clear limits, a mandate ending on December 31, 2027, unless renewed by Security Council, and mandatory 6-monthly reporting to UNSC. At Davos, however, President Trump unveiled a permanent charter backed by a $1 billion funding model, describing the Board of Peace as an international organization designed to promote stability, restore lawful governance, and secure enduring peace, not only in Gaza but potentially in other conflict zones as well. The shift from a time-bound UN-authorized mechanism to a standing body led by a single political figure has raised questions across diplomatic circles. The charter language does not confine the Board of Peace strictly to Gaza, nor does it include a sunset clause aligned with the Security Council resolution. US officials have indicated that the same template could be applied to other theaters without seeking fresh authorization, prompting concerns about mission creep and institutional overreach. Another point of contention is financing. Under the announced structure, continuation beyond an initial phase is tied to $1 billion contribution. Critics argue this risks turning a peace mechanism from a system of burden sharing into pay and stay model, where financial commitment becomes a gateway to permanence and influence. Governance has also drawn scrutiny. The Board of Peace features a tiered structure, a top board of heads of state and a government chaired by President Trump, and a Gaza-level administrative layer that includes a Palestinian technocratic committee responsible for day-to-day management. While Palestinian participation is acknowledged, decision-making authority over priorities, budgets, and sequencing appears concentrated at the top. Diplomats caution that advisory role do not equal political ownership, particularly in post-conflict reconstruction where legitimacy is central to long-term stability. The timing is significant. Global diplomacy is increasingly shaped by coalitions rather than institutions, a shift that can deliver speed but often narrows who decides and who adopts. The Board of Peace reflects this trend, flexible, leader-driven, and less constrained by a multilateral procedure. For India, the implications are direct. India has a major stake in West Asian stability, from energy security and diaspora welfare to shipping routes and investment flows. A credible reconstruction pathway for Gaza is in India's interest. But Indian policymakers are also attentive to precedent. Mechanisms created for one crisis often travel to others. A peace model built on invitation-only participation, monetized permanence, and personalized authority raises long-term concerns for countries that value sovereign consent and multilateral rulemaking. The key questions for India are practical. Will the Board of Peace remain bound by international law in practice? Will it commit to a Gaza-only mandate and a fixed end date unless renewed by the Security Council? How tightly is expansion restricted? What checks exist on the chair's authority? And what exactly does $1 billion contribution represent? Reconstruction funding or political membership? India faces a strategic choice. It can seek to shape the mandate and guardrails of the Board of Peace from within, or support Gaza's restructuring without joining structure whose rules and reach remains undefined. UN institutions are often criticized for delay, but delay operates within rules and procedures. Faster mechanisms driven by personal authority may move quickly, but they also carry the risk of unpredictability. As Gaza urgently needs rebuilding, the wider international system faces a parallel test, ensuring that urgency does not become a license to rewrite the rules of multilateral legitimacy. The balance between speed and restraint may determine whether new peace initiatives stabilize conflict zones or reshape global governance in ways that outlasts the crisis. On this issue, I am joined by Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, former Indian diplomat, and Professor Swaran Singh, School of International Studies, JNU. Ambassador Dayal, your opening comments. Should we be part of that table, or should we choose to be outside?
Well, first of all, let me say that the Board of Peace, formally launched by President Trump at the World Economic Forum in Davos on 22nd January, is a vanity project and a manifestation of Trump's ego. While originally endorsed by UN Security Council 2803 to oversee Gaza's post-war reconstruction, The board's new charter has mutated into a broader global governance mechanism that many observers argue is designed to center around Trump himself. Now, India has not yet joined Trump's board of peace, choosing instead a wait and watch approach. Now, while India has received an official invitation and has not formally declined, it was notably absent from the signing ceremony which was held on 22nd January. India's decision to remain non-committal is driven by several strategic, legal, and geopolitical concerns. Now, firstly, Delhi is wary of the border peace potential to bypass the existing United Nations framework. India has historically insisted that the international peacekeeping and reconstruction efforts must occur under a UN mandate. The fact that several key partners of the US, including France, Germany, and UK, have decided not to join has also led India to question the board's global legitimacy and whether it will survive beyond the current Trump administration. Secondly, let me mention, India seeks to maintain its independent foreign policy and avoid becoming an instrument of unilateral US initiatives that may have unclear legal standing or decision-making processes. Thus, India would like to not to take any action which could erode its strategic autonomy. There is one more important reason. The board includes Israeli leadership but excludes Palestinian leadership, which conflicts with India's long-standing support for a negotiated two-state solution and Palestinian determination, self-determination. Moreover, as you said, the permanent membership of the board reportedly requires a $1 billion contribution to a reconstruction fund, and creating concerns that the initiative is more transactional than humanitarian and is some sort of a billionaire's club. Let me mention one final reason. Pakistan formally joined the Board of Peace at the Davos ceremony. Now, India is cautious about sharing a diplomatic platform with Pakistan, especially given concerns that the board's broad mandate could eventually be expanded by Trump to include the Kashmir dispute. So there are lots of questions which are being asked about this entire BOP so-called vanity exercise of Trump. But it is not a convincing enough body for us. And for all the reasons that I have mentioned, we have not yet indicated whether we are joining.
Professor Swaran Singh, a lot of people say that Donald Trump is treating this resettlement as a real estate development, and this resettlement is without any political voice or legitimacy, because without political resettlement, how can you have a sort of a real the sort of the redevelopment which he is talking about? And secondly, as Ambassador Dayal said, that it's a vanity project, but this vanity project intends to dismantle United Nations. Is that correct?
That's quintessentially Donald Trump. If you read the charter that he has just enunciated, the very opening line talks about need for courage to depart from approaches and institutions that have very often failed. It's an aspersion on United Nations very clearly. And of course, charter makes him look like the supreme leader because chairman decides everything and can veto everyone else and so on. It's an interesting document to read. But what is interesting here is, despite his dissatisfaction or disaffection with India, he has invited India, which I think is a recognition of India's stature at international level, but particularly when it comes to matters Middle East. Even President Joe Biden had ensured that India was in I2U2 kind of quad that he had built between Israel, UAE, United States, and India was part of it. So India's recognition is underlined. Second, when India is taking its own time, we are studying as officially it is told. There are the majority of countries, out of 60 countries that are supposed to potentially be so-called quote unquote invited by the chairman. About 19 at best is the highest number that we know that have kind of responded so far. But what is interesting is that none of the major countries have responded so far. None of the G7 and none of the permanent five of UN Security Council except United States, which is proposing this whole vanity project in this case. So it's perfectly fine. India is on the right side as most nations are taking their own time. But when it comes to India, I think India is very careful in terms of strategic caution, given its very significant, unusual, unique relationship with Middle East countries. I always underline how India is friend of Israel, but also friend of Iran, friend of Saudi Arabia, but also friend of UAE, friend of Egypt, and so on. In that kind of holistic, very, very interesting relationship across the region, India is already organizing the second Arab League foreign ministers meeting in Delhi. India is hosting on 30th and 31st January. And I think that will be an occasion to do consultations, which is required. You must consult regional stakeholders before India decides as to how it wants to respond. Then, of course, there are issues in principle of India's discomfort with anything that is trying to skirt United Nations. And in this case, of course, Charter is undermining United Nations in that sense. So India doesn't want initiatives outside United Nations, particularly leader-centric, individual-centric initiatives of this nature, where, as you underlined in the beginning, there is a fee to buy your permanent seat. I think that is something which must have inspired Donald Trump from Elon Musk. Twitter used to give you blue tick once you establish your credentials, until he came and said you can pay the fee and get the blue tick. But even Elon Musk at Davos was laughing away on board of peace, saying, is it PIECE? That means a piece of Gaza, a piece of Venezuela, or a piece of Greenland. And what kind of board is that? So even his close allies are not sure as to what is this initiative is meant to ultimately lead to. But yes, some countries have agreed upon it. Some of these countries had their representative standings there. So if you allow me, I think in terms of optics, also India not being in that group of leaders was, I think, very calculated way of doing it, because India didn't want to see any of senior ministers standing next to Pakistani Prime Minister who's endorsing whatever President Trump wants to see. So in multiple ways, I think it's a very calculated decision to take time, consult regional leaders, see how international community, major powers, middle powers are responding to this board of peace, and then take a call, because enormous investment of personal efforts of Prime Minister, who has visited Middle East so many times. He was in December only in Jordan and Oman. And the overall connect that India historically has had with most of these countries. India will take time, will consult these other regional leaders, international stakeholders, and so on. And I'm sure that President Trump is by now used to India taking its own time. So he's not kind of too worried about India jumping the boat immediately, jumping onto the boat. India will take time, and I think that is how India wants to focus on long-term interests and how this institution is understood and how it is to be taken forward. Because right now it seems Donald Trump centric individually. It even mentions the chairman will be the President Donald J. Trump. He will anoint a successor, and even when he is removed by unanimous voting, which is impossible, immediately his anointed successor will take over. Charter is a very interesting document to read. It is written, Donald Trump is written all over it.
But Ambassador, but despite all this, that nothing will come out of it. But the fact is that apart from one or two politicians or one or two countries, there is no intellectual, ideological, or organizational, or sort of a combined resistance to what Donald Trump is trying to do.
No, I think there is enough resistance. UK, France, and Germany, who are also fellow members of G7 along with the United States, have decided not to join it. and they have raised serious questions about the legitimacy of this sort of an organization, saying that it's trying to perform functions which actually have to be performed by the United Nations. Then, of course, Canada has given him a very confrontational sort of reaction. Trump had said all kinds of things that Canada should be grateful to the United States, because if the US was not there, Canada wouldn't have existed. And of course, the Canadian Prime Minister very flatly said that Canada is there because of the Canadians, and it's thriving because of that. Nonetheless, the fact is that this entire exercise which Trump has undertaken is nothing but a ego extension. It's a manifestation of his ego. And Trump's ego plays a big role in shaping his approach and policies as the President of the United States of America. His behavior is always characterized by inflated self-esteem, and he projects himself as superior or better than others. And that's why the Charter explicitly names Donald Trump as the inaugural chairman and says that this is the position which he will hold for life or until he voluntarily resigns, even after he leaves the White House. So Trump will hold sole power to invite, dismiss other countries, member countries, set agendas, issue resolutions, and exercise the time. So all this shows that it is totally Trump-centric. It has no legitimacy, and it has no reason to come into existence at all. Some countries have come out and support. Sir. I don't think this will be going anywhere.
Absolutely. Thank you both of you. Thank you both of you for joining me on Point 2, and I completely agree. This is a reflection of Donald Trump's megalomania. But this Board of Peace plan should be a flop. So this is all I had on Point tonight. I'll see you next week at the same time. Thank you and good night.
रश्मि,
हाँ?
ये मैडम बड़े शहर से छोटे शहर बसने जा रही है, बताओ।
अंकल
इंडिया के छोटे छोटे शहरों में ही तो है बड़े बड़े अखाड़े।
नए नए दावपेच सीखेगी और फ्यूचर में मेडल जीतेगी। और बेटा, इनका फ्यूचर?
बड़े पापा, SBI लाइफ से इनका फ्यूचर सिक्योर है।
तभी तो इसकी जीत का इरादा पक्का है। करो पूरे अपने इरादे,
अपनों से किए सभी वादे।
SBI लाइफ अपने लिए।